Hello, creatives, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel. I am your host, RP. This is the channel RPG with DBJ, and I am your host, DBJ. Sorry, just a little bit confused of myself, which often happens here. Sorry about the delay and a little confusion because I am also trying to stream to yet another platform, and apparently it is not allowing me to do such a thing. So I apologize for that, and apologize to the people who I am trying to also stream to. By the way, guys, this show is streamed live each day, Monday through Friday, to both an either or Discord, Twitch, YouTube, and more. Hopefully, apparently, one of these days. Anyway, today is Third Pillar Thursday, and it is the third pillar of exploration. For those who don't know, the first and second pillars in tabletop RPG parlance is combat and social interactions, and those two tend to be the pillars that are most often focused on. But there is a third pillar of gaming, something that makes the tabletop RPG experience more stable, let's say, much like having a third leg on a two-leg table. There is exploration, and for me, exploration also incorporates not just exploring the unknown, like a dungeon or an abandoned house or an alien planet, but it incorporates using the environment within the game, having a mechanical and narrative effect on the gameplay itself. So, for those who don't know, I am a writer for Critical Hit Publishing, and part of my efforts is to promote the idea of using the environment. Now, some of you might be thinking, like, what does this have to do with, like, the weird Tiger King docu-series that was, available on Netflix, at least available on Netflix here in the States? What does all this have to do with it? Well, for those who are new here, I see you there, Pet Ogre. No problem. You're a newbie. Very good. Well, we're gonna dive into it. All right. So for those who don't know as well, there is a docu series, a couple of 7 episodes, about a gentleman who is larger than life and delves into some of the strange and bizarre happenings of the people who live in the States and own big cats. They breed them, they keep them in captivity for better or worse. People from the outside come and visit them, and many of them have these larger than life personalities, where you have a host of other people on the perimeter, from a person who considers himself to be a mystical doctor to a woman who is the arch rival of Joe Exotic, drug dealers, people who are could be viewed as individuals who have been cast off from normal civilized society and are absorbed into these groups. But again, we're talking about exploration. Okay, so the first part is that where these big cats come from is very important. Now, of course, since we're talking about tabletop RPGs, you don't have to incorporate big cats into your setting unless you want to, but you can incorporate some kind of, from any mundane but dangerous predator all the way up to anything that's mythological or anything of the nature. Going to a deserted isle to try to find a baby kaiju or something incorporates into this. Of course, Dungeons and Dragons has 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, and the other editions have had the Tarrasque as the epitome of the giant monster. Yeah, hey there. Hello there. Yeah. Dead man says Joe Exotic's real name is Joseph Allen um Maldonado Passage. Yeah, that's too much of a mouthful. although although I'm sure Joe Exotic wouldn't mind something being a mouthful. Boom boom. So what a strange and bizarre and like incredible personality many of these people have. Of course, the docu-series is edited to highlight the crazy, but we kind of have fun with that, if we take everything with a grain of salt. But that being said, when it comes to exploration in a tabletop games, first of all, we need to know where these things come from. The wizard that has as Red Dice Diaries has said, the menagerie of animals and such. Where do they come from? Well, they got to come from somewhere, and that could be a distant isle across the mountain range, a something down deep into the underdark, or another realm of existence, for example, right? RDD's like, yeah, I'm all about that menagerie. Yeah. So the first part is, and much like I believe I remember having the red box or purple box that had the Isle of Dread. Yeah, and I remember opening up the Isle of Dread, one of the very first widespread hex crawls. It was basically an island, and it was, dreadful. And it had a number of encounters, and the player characters could arrive on an island at any spot and walk around, and basically it was a sandbox. It was the very first, I believe, before the term sandbox came out. It was a sandbox adventure, and it didn't have like a big. Well, it had a slight story to it, but it really didn't matter. It was a method to have the players explore a jungle-like island. Of course, you had to have dinosaurs and tribes people and pseudo humanoids living in the trees and whatnot. Of course, you had to have that. Using there was an excellent picture of like flying squirrel-like beings that were sentient. But anyway, the so of course the very easy thing is, okay, what is out there that needs to be brought back? Now the player characters might be involved in bringing such a thing back, or on a sailing ship that after the crew has already captured said things and need to protect them, i.e. keeping them in the cages and protecting themselves and protecting others from their escape. They may be guards or hunters themselves, or it could be the opposite, where they're trying to stop the proliferation of said capture of animals or mystical creatures or mythological predators of any type. Now, getting them back to civilization is, for me, is where we can really dial deep into the exploration pillar of gaming. And that's where you can incorporate the wildness, the predators on, say, a sailing ship that happens to have a saboteur on the ship, and you're out to sea, and someone opens up one or more of these cages and lets these predators out on a very bounded location. Bounding a location is a pretty cool tool to use to put in your back pocket as a game master. Meaning, a bounded location basically means that the player characters have a heavy difficulty escaping or moving out of the region that they are, which is why so many teleportation and flight seems to be the bane of most game masters and dungeon masters out there. But a bounded location, a sailing ship, an abandoned building, a prison, a cave complex deep down in the Underdark, a floating castle. These are locations where, when you get to the edges of the bounded location, it becomes far more of a problem for the players to circumvent such a such a boundary. So if the players don't have access, or even if they do have access to, like teleportation or flight, if they're out on a vast ocean or a huge lake and the shore is the shoreline is very distant, and there's a one or more predators, one or more predators running around on the ship, then even if a player has flight, they of course may have to land to engage what's going on. Of course, you can have plenty of NPCs getting their asses handed to them by some kind of predator, while the player characters are trying to figure out how do we stop this thing and sail back home. And yeah, Deadman says Chip, CH apostrophe P. Yeah, Chip the Squirrel, looking alien from the Green Lantern Corps was the proverbial image from the Isle of Dread adventure module, and I don't remember the code for it. It was a letter number, like the old modules were like S3, X4, P5 or something like that, and so that's what they were. Ooh, look at that image. That's cool. Yeah. Anyway, just as a reminder for out there, guys. Yes, of course, you can join the Discord server. We are hanging out in the boiler room, and you can also join in or comment or whatever on Twitch and YouTube as well. So of course, let's say we have a bounded location. Also there was it X1? Thank you very much, Deadman. It was X1. I couldn't remember the code for it, but yeah. And for those who are tabletop RPG like armchair historians, you can look it up, and of course you can always go to Wikipedia and find out what it was about, who wrote it, and stuff. Thank you. Yeah, well, Deadman helps me get there. Of course, I love that image on the front as well. Oh man, I use that so many times. Now the a bounded talking about a bounded location, the location that something happens in. Again, the sailing ship where the dinosaur or saber-toothed tiger or the basilisk or the manticore gets loose on the ship. You can really play with the interior and exteriors of a sailing ship. Listen, if you've ever seen any movie at all that has had sailing ships in it, you know that you have the interiors of it. And yes, I absolutely agree with you there, Red Dice. Yeah, Deadman is he's hot on it. He is the shit, the shiznit on those links and stuff. And by the way, for not just for my benefit, but when Deadman and Tesla throw in a lot of links, if you guys join the Discord and you have those interests in mind, you can always go to the Discord and just click the link itself. So while you listen to me in the background, you can look those things up. So it's not just for my benefit, but it's for everyone else. And of course, since it's posted in the Discord, it's always there as well. So you can always go back and take a look at it. So it's like a living library, really. If a living library of knowledge and exploration in the tabletop RPG community. Now, a sailing ship, of course, has the upper deck. You know me, I love the idea of like heavy waves washing people off the deck of the ship. You have a lot of incidental weapons and things, meaning like someone could trip and fall over ropes. You could tie ropes around someone's limb or their neck. You can climb up into the crow's nests. You have sails and how I know how I would do it in the game, but how you would adjudicate someone taking a dagger and jumping off the crow's nest and using the dagger to slide down the sail by ripping through it with their blade. I'm just going to leave that out there and let you guys figure out how you would adjudicate that in your game. Now, of course, it would depend on how realistic or cinematic that action is, but I'm going to let that sit out there and dangle. Now, of course, with a sailing ship, of course, you don't want to set it on fire, but setting a ship on fire while it's out on sea isn't really a good thing. A ship that may start to sink from the predator ripping things up also presents another hazard, and I am the living embodiment of this of the self-appointed third pillarist of exploration in tabletop games, that I would absolutely include, an escalating danger when the ship maybe begins to fill with water. You have a predator running around maybe on the interior portions with very small amounts of space, running up on the deck, or maybe even jumping overboard and wasting everyone's time. Pet Ogre says, as I'll be GMing Harn soon, that end in a loud thunk. I, I hear you. Oh man! And by the way, again, thanks for finding this out and joining in and all that kind of stuff. So okay, so maybe it's not a sailing ship. Maybe the players have gone on a long journey across desolate locations, trudge their way through jungles, going through a desert, or what have you. The proverbial players with a caravan is also a great idea, meaning the players might be, in a caravan with cages, and there are dangerous predators inside of those cages. They may have traveled up to the highest mountain peaks to collect an egg or a baby Pegasus or some other kinds of wild or dangerous animals that they need to bring back. Or again, they may be on the opposite side to try to attack the very people who are enslaving these predators, these majestic predators as well. Yep. Yeah. Red Dice brings up, how about they're forging a new trade route like the Silk Road, which, of course, brings in you have dangers creating the road itself, right? Whether they are literally the very first people to travel in a particular location, or to establish some kind of safety on a very low traveled area. You can throw in a ton of social interactions when they meet people that they may not be able to communicate with, or they are divergently, they're in different social strata, and so many people, in our own lives, when people, the age of exploration, when a lot of Europeans travel around the world, there's of course language barriers, cultural barriers. Each side has their own political and economic and, even safety or wartime or spy networks that they want to incorporate, and having the players travel on like a Silk Road to the Far East. And of course you have, of course you could turn the volume up to 11, and you might have celestial dragons and Kyrin and Oni and Ogre Magi and all that other kind of stuff incorporated in this kind of world. And the players might be introduced to monsters that they have never encountered before back in their own hometown, but on this trade route they may. And of course there might be political reasons for encouraging or disrupting the enslavement of, or the capture of, these majestic predators, right? Making the other side, your enemy, look foolish, or making mistakes or things like that might raise up your social status or your political clout. And so the players may need to look out for saboteurs, assassins, and that kind of thing. Now, and mind you, the players may have to travel back over land. If you're using some kind of flying ships or something, again, that's another danger. If one of these monsters gets loose, the idea that a massive creature uses its tail to smack at one of the player characters and almost knocks them off the railing of a flying vessel, or the predator climbs up into the crow's nest and, is roaring and screaming and maybe belching out some kind of magical breath weapon or something, and the player characters are trying to placate its anger. I think it's kind of cool. Now, when they get back home to the enclave, the place where I'm going to use the term big cats, are are resting. Resting is a very general word. Maybe it may be too nice for some people. Ensuring that they are properly fed and treated, maybe domesticated, trained, getting these animals used to, or monsters or mythological creatures used to humanity, would allow the again, this is where player characters, you can use some of their skills, maybe some of their medical skills, animal handling skills, hell, even sleight of hand skill to try to put to put a harness or a saddle or something like that over top of an animal's head, like cowboys and breaking horses or something. I remember the Dark of Hot Springs Island RPG content. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. The Hot Springs Island, like Red Dice is saying, is great for exploration journey style game as well. And again, I understand that what's old is new again, meaning like hex crawling is a type of gaming where the player characters choose where they want to go, and the game master basically has a number of chosen and or random encounters based on the direction the players travel. The Isle of Cholt from was it called Tomb of Annihilation? Most recently. Most recently revealed from WotC is another version of like a hex crawl, a sandbox exploration kind of thing. And what's really cool about a sandbox, a bounded location for a sandbox, like an island, the tropey jungle island, is that you could establish any number of encounters, good handful, 3 to 5, and give them some players have some really great social interactions, some physical exploration, climbing, jumping, swimming, hacking through underbrush, reskinning any, if not all, of the traps that you have in your books. A pit trap could just be a cavity in the ground. A collapsing ceiling trap could just be a tree or boulders or something like that falling out of the sky. What is it? A net trap that falls off from the ceiling to trap the PCs could just be jungle vines or the web from a spider, or either forgotten or used by the spider to collect prey and whatnot, and so on and so forth. Right? Torrential rain, humidity, high winds, monsoons, floodwaters, mudslides. Crossing ravines, deep ravines with raging rivers while trees have fallen across the ravines, and trying to balance your way across moss-covered, tree trunks while trying to escape or chase after jungle trolls and things. And for me, the third pillar of exploration is placing the players in a location that otherwise might make an encounter boring, but now you've ramped it up because of the location, and start off with, of course, the narrative portion of it, and then start to include the mechanical portions. And you guys know me, just like you have social interactions like intimidation, persuasion, carousing, seduction, diplomacy, deceptions. Just like in physical combat, you have ranged and melee combat. You have, special tactics. You have spell casting. You have sneak attacks and grappling. Well, for exploration, especially when in the heat of battle, you have static locations, escalations, random events, or random conditions. You have yourself timed conditions. So use those kind of aspects when you're using the environment. You're in a valley and the torrential rains are making the place flood. That's a timed event as the water levels start to rise. it's like or it could be used as an escalating event, the player characters needing to walk up a muddy hill, and then there's a big huge mudslide. And of course, having the environment should be a character unto itself that may that might both benefit and or hinder both the player characters and the creatures, monsters, NPCs that you have in your world. So, much like being attacked by a shark or an alligator in water, it's not just being attacked by them, but also being drowned or having the possibility of drowning adds to that. It's not that the creature's controlling its lair, it's living in its own environment, so it would benefit such a thing. But if the PCs are fighting pirates and a PC tackles a pirate off the edge of a ship and they're fighting each other with daggers while trying to swim in storm-tossed waters, most likely this is more of a skill thing. The storm-tossed waters are not benefiting either side of in that kind of interaction. Oh, hey, well, take care. Believe you me, I'm here each day for an hour, Monday through Friday. So whatever, pop on in. But take care of yourselves out there. I know everyone is like, or many of us are homebound. Unfortunately, I'm not, but you get the point. Now, the once the players get back home, and I say home very loosely, loosely, wherever these predators are going to be, the enclosures that they're located in is also an environment, right? Let's take, for example, let's take Jurassic Park. That's a common one. I think that most, if not all of us, are familiar with, where you have a bounded location, a jungle island. The island has lots of jungles, rivers, mountainous regions, valleys, all the stuff that I talked about before, including weather events, right? High winds might, that person that's the archer or the person who throws things through the air, maybe those high winds disrupt ranged attacks, giving it capital D disadvantage to strike things very far away. Torrential rains can put out fires. Maybe everything that's being anyone outside under the torrential rain has resistance to fire and heat effects. Maybe even reducing, having the range and or duration of fire effects. Sorry about that, pyromancer wizard out there, but that might be the case, as well as putting out fires if someone's being burned. Torrential rains lead to other things such as mudslides and filling valleys with water, low-lying pools of water, or causing floods and things like that, right? Storms, bolts of lightning out of the sky. So you have weather events, you have the physical locations, and then combined with the physical locations, you also have the man-made locations. Again, exploration of the environment is wherever you're standing, whatever you're looking at, whatever you can touch and feel and smell and just interact with is the environment. Jurassic Park has buildings, and of course, with those buildings, you have you could have towers. You have the tall walls with the electrical fences that it had in Jurassic Park, right? You had the enclosures and the pens, the solid steel cages that they had that they were going to load in, on trucks. A cage makes an excellent encounter, right? Player character gets trapped in a cage. Uh-oh, how do we unlock the cage? Do you break it open? Do you melt the bars? Do you pick the lock? How do you do that? My answer to that is I created the problem. You guys solve it, right? It's a great idea to use that. In addition to which, a great thing about a cage is there's a possibility of tricking a massive beast to go into a cage, maybe, drawing it in with food or some other kind of thing. A cage could be dropped on top of a subject or a predator, trapping it in there, or even the PCs inside of it. Cages might be able to be lifted up by mechanical means, maybe by the cages are being offloaded or loaded onto ships, and so you have cranes. Now you have height. You're not just horizontal, but now you're vertical in your environment. And a cage door opens up while it's in the air. Does a player character hang off of the cage door while the predator inside is trying to snatch at them? Do the player characters use the cage as cover? Do you allow a cage to be used as cover? Possibly. You might need to adjudicate certain things. For example, a cage does not necessarily protect you from, say, a breath weapon, but maybe a cage limits the reach of a monster. So maybe instead of it getting its claw and bite attacks and its tail attacks, maybe going into the cage, the creature can only reach one limb into the cage while the players are in there, which might give them a little bit of protection from said thing. Or maybe the cage is big enough where a predator can't reach inside of it, but again, the players might be trapped inside of the cage instead of outside. A cage, combining a cage with an escalating danger also works as well. A cage falling into quicksand, mud, falling off of a ship, or falling into a river or lake, or it's trapped somewhere where rain or floodwaters are rising. So now the player characters are trapped inside of something where they may drown. I'm looking at you, Casino Royale, where James Bond got to see his Vesper die in Venice while she was inside of an elevator, one of those elevators, those old elevators with the sliding cage doors, and the building began to sink, and it was flooding and water, and he's down in there trying to open it up, and putting the player characters in a precarious situation and creating the problem and letting the players choose how to solve the problem, I think is a great tool. And I really haven't even incorporated a lot of the extra danger of not just having the environment be a hazard, but incorporating the monsters and the powerful creatures. For example, in this same scenario that I'm talking about, let's say the player characters capture a manticore, right? The lion-maned, human-faced, sharp-toothed, flying mythological creature with the spiked tail. Without the environment, it just becomes I attack it, it attacks us, right? Player characters, what do? I shoot my magic missile. I shoot my arrows. I throw my axe at it. Okay, roll. Okay, it tries to hit you with a spiked tail. But what if one of the player characters is inside of a cage? What if the manticore is flying around and using cover to hide? What if one of the player characters is trying to get a height advantage and a place to snipe the thing? What if the manticore uses its claws to try to, rip at the sails of the sailing ship that it escaped from to cause the mast to fall down on the player characters and such, and so on and so forth, using the environment to become more dynamic, to become hazardous, and of course, letting the players use and abuse the environment themselves. It shouldn't always be player characters suck, environment hurts. It should be, here's the environment, here's the possible dangers. How do you get around such a thing, right? Now, when we have ourselves like, say, a Jurassic Park styled location, much like the Tiger King documentary, all of these places had a place for the public to come visit these majestic creatures, and of course the creatures had the pens that they lived in, from very small tight cages all the way to open landscapes for these animals to run around. Here in just south of Zanesville, here in the state of Ohio, we have a place called the Wildlands. Wow, my brain just farted on me. But anyway, you can take a safari ride on either an enclosed or open-aired biodiesel trucks and drive through an area that used to be mined out by I believe it was AEP, which is a utility company, and the land was returned back to its natural state as much as possible. So they have a lot of ranged styled Serengeti style animals here. You can visit them, and so maybe there is a the location where these large predators are at is very open, like an open landscape, and the public can come visit here. Everything from rich nobles and rich and powerful merchants and politicos. Maybe there's even places for the common people to drop off a couple of copper, or heck, in sci-fi worlds, you have whole planets or asteroids or something that have been used as a zoo to collect exotic animals, and so the same thing could happen in these locations as well. And the structures that are built for the care and monitoring of these animals might be very important. So instead of like one dungeon, there might be any number of locations, including underground tunnels, open pens with tall fences. Those fences, of course, could be protected with, like, what did we see? Electrical lines in Jurassic Park. They could be protected by magic or some other kinds of technology like force fields, or some kind of force technology. Maybe there is something, in using technological terms, those animals could be tagged in some way with chips that could either monitor them on maps that could be overlaid through a HUD into the retinal patterns uh, of the player characters, or maybe there's even a way to pacify the creatures technologically, like knocking them out, stunning them, electrifying them, or what have you. Yes, yes, Deadman. Deadman brings up the crazy true story of the Zanesville Zoo escape. Yeah, Terry Thompson owned was. You could claim that this guy had these big cats, much like the people, the characters in the Tiger King documentary, and of course the county went in and the sheriff was going to evict this dude and take away his animals. And so, long story short, this gentleman committed suicide and let all his animals out. And so the animals escaped, and yep, 51 dead in Ohio. Body count 50 exotic animals, one man. Chris Heath reports on the Zanesville massacre. And unfortunately, they did have to put those animals down. But you could take that same story, some kind of, I'll say wizard again, or sage, or something like that, or even a rich noble, pissed off at the community around them, lets their animals loose and locks themselves away. So maybe this person has to be brought to justice, and the player characters have to put down these beasts, which are, through no fault of their own, don't know how to survive in the wild, yet they don't want to be in captivity as well. And so what do? How do you save them? And maybe the player characters really do are like, you know what? We don't want to kill these things. No matter how dangerous they are, we don't want to kill them. We just want to save their lives. And saving the life of a predator doesn't necessarily mean that they understand what's happening. They can still be very dangerous, which is a truism today, and could be very truism in your tabletop gaming. So yeah. Omen says, I wish there was just a way to send them back to their homes. Like send the lion back to Africa or the polar bear back to the Arctic. Unfortunately, domesticating animals, when they come in contact with human beings, they start to, many of them do not know how to survive on the wild. And unfortunately, much like how we've bred domestic animals themselves, my house cat is sitting next to me. My house cat was bred for the purposes of living in and around humanity, right? So a lot of these cats that are bred within captivity, that are generation after generation bred in captivity, they are being bred to become more docile, because the less dangerous the animal, the more they have traits that we consider to be beneficial to humanity, the greater chance they have of having offspring. So the more bestial animals often get killed or die off and don't breed simply because of their danger, right? An animal that attacks a human being in captivity more often than not doesn't get the opportunity to live a long life and get a chance to breed. Whereas the ones that are the most docile, the cuter animals, the ones that we consider to have behavioral and visual traits that we admire, are the ones usually that get to breed early and often. And so those are, unfortunately, you can't send them back. But in what we're talking about with in our tabletop games, you could incorporate that. So the monstrous bestial creatures out in the world that are always mindless things running around killing things, maybe the owl bear is docile and you can scratch it behind the ear and it loves to be fed by hand. Maybe there is a manticore that doesn't mind being ridden by the noble's son and daughter, because the manticores have been bred to live on the open air property of the rich noble and live. It has the manticore has a nest, or there's a griffin that lives up in the highest reaches of a tower, and it's like the family pet or something like that, right? Those things can be very true. Dead Man says the protective dire wolf is kept while the aggressive one is put down. Exactly, exactly. Now, remember, it's the traits that we want. So, for example, a tribal people could very much, and I'm going to air quote, domesticate dire wolves, but those dire wolves could still be hideously dangerous against strangers, right? The tribes people were like, no, they have the traits we want. We didn't train them or domesticate them to have the traits you want, right? So some animals, I suppose you could put military dogs and canine units in that category, meaning like the canine unit of a police force or law enforcement. Those animals are trained to perform the action that the law enforcement wants, but they are still trained to be aggressive, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean they're domesticated and non-violent. It just means they're domesticated and are able to operate with a sense of purpose. Now, that purpose might not even be trained. For example, I'm sure when wolves, the dire wolves, were beginning to be domesticated, they may not have been considered pets. They may have lived side by side, right? They may not have been something that they could be ordered to do a thing, but I could imagine the dogs, before they became dogs, the wolves could, for example, encircle a tribe of people, keeping other predators away, knowing that tribe of people would feed them. So it could be a quid pro quo relationship as well. The rich noble feeds the manticore that lives up in a tower because the manticore knows where its food's coming from, and anybody that attacks the keep gets attacked by the manticore, not because it's been ordered to, but it knows where its next meal's coming from, right? It's got a safe place to live. It gets regular food. Every once in a while, the kids come and tug on its tail or rub its tummy, and it doesn't mind, but it may not be, in our modern day sense, a pet. So, since circling back to this third pillarism, where these animals are located, again, living in a tall tower, using height, using open space versus narrow spaces, using, look up those rules for tight spaces in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. It's in there. It's just, it may not be where you think it is, but those rules are in there. Disadvantage on dex saves, reductions on armor class, being able or not being able to use or disadvantage on ranged attacks and things of that nature. But guiding a flying creature into a narrow space is a great idea. And so being able to use the environment to the player characters using it to their advantage, the creatures using the environment to their advantage, really can make an encounter far more dynamic than I roll to hit it, it rolls to hit me on behind a green screen, right? Or in front of a green screen, I'm sorry. Now, before I segue away from the Jurassic Park animal enclosure idea, with buildings being around a place where there's wild animals, those buildings could have different functions, and instead of having like one big dungeon, you could have the danger of having to run between buildings because those buildings may have different aspects. For example, one building might be the medical pen, and that medical location might have concoctions, drugs, alchemical mixtures, tranquilizer darts or something, nets, cages, shackles to capture the animals. Whereas the main complex with maybe video monitors, or it's the place with it's the most secure place on the island or up in the mountains or something. Spreading out buildings as well, both the height of the buildings and how they operate in a subterranean manner. They could be linked through subterranean tunnels. They could have HVAC systems where the player characters have to crawl through them, and of course putting themselves in danger, not knowing if something will sneak into the crawling place, like a snake or a limb of some of the creatures or something, or a breath weapon getting blown into a tight tunnel. Now, Scott Poe says, it's D&D. He should be the Boule King or Displacer Owlbear King. Exactly, right? And of course we can play that game in our own world. Again, the documentary, I don't want to say exposed, but shined a spotlight on this strange underground of wild animal collectors. And so stealing that to put it in our own games might be cool. Hey, there's this wizard that has all these animals, and the players are like, that's strange. That's like a one-off. And then you come to find out that nope, there's a rich noble to the north, and then there's a criminal organization to the south because that crime lord loves having a big menagerie of animals or something, right? You can incorporate all that kind of stuff in the game, even if it's like a one-off for your particular setting. And much like the difference between Exotic Joe and Carol in the documentary, you could have a place put together by like thread and tape and spit. You're almost scratching your head and you're surprised why there hasn't been an accident yet. Whereas additionally, maybe there's someone else who's very charismatic and keeps the place clean and is a consummate salesman, much like the circus, and you have the person in the top hat, the like the greatest showman, the person who sells the performance of the people in the circus. Maybe there's someone who's very charismatic and it's like advertises that the public can come for just 5 copper. You too can see, a dragon held in captivity, and the players come there and they're like, it's just a wyvern, right? You know how players are, it's just a wyvern, no big deal. But even if a wyvern is kept in captivity, of course you have yourselves a whole host of factions, Druidic cults and the public and rivals and law enforcement and so on and so forth that want to encourage or disrupt or destroy this kind of economy. Now, lastly, I will say that, again, using the third pillar, sometimes animals themselves create their own environment. Many animals create their own living spaces, whether it is a badger creates creates a dam, a bird creates a nest, big cats like to mark their territory. certain types of animals go on patrols, like jackals and hyenas attack in packs, just like wolves. There's not only can their behavior, not only is instinctually could their behavior use the environment to their, the barker. There it is. The barker, like, hear ye, or come, to the three ring circus, blah blah blah, and everyone comes from the outside. Much like Jurassic Park and the Jurassic World movies, when the public is involved, we also can go right back to using mobs of people. There's nothing cooler than taking mobs of innocent people and mowing them down like like wheat, having their body parts ripped open and people screaming while their entrails get ripped out. You guys know you love that. Yeah, I know you do. I know you do. Right? So throwing in a ton of disposable NPCs is a great idea, especially if you want to foreshadow a danger the players may not be familiar with. Some guy who's got a cattle prod poking the wyvern gets stabbed in the thigh by the poisonous barb of the wyvern's tail and dies from the poison is a great foreshadow to let the brand new players understand the danger of being around a wyvern, right? Many times in movies, that's why the red shirts get killed, right? It's kind of a joke and it is a trope, but the reason for that is to let the public, meaning the viewer, but also to let your PCs, your player characters, know, hey, here's the danger. I'm going to have the dragon breathe out a cone of cold. And the players are like, cold? I didn't know dragons could breathe out cold. That's weird, because they're brand new. Or maybe you have designed a new type of creature, or maybe you've reskinned a creature, or maybe the players come in contact with a basilisk, but the public describes it as a giant Komodo dragon, or maybe the player characters just assume it's a Komodo dragon because they are in a Far East styled Legend of the Five Rings realm, and to let them know maybe someone, maybe some assholes like, kicking around the monster, and the monster takes a good gander at the person that's doing it, and instead of turning him into maybe turns him into a statue of stone, maybe turns him into a tree, turns them into crystal or ice or something like that, whatever, by reskinning it, reflavoring it, and then the player character is like, oh, okay. Now, letting the players know what danger they're about to get involved in, that's not a cheat. That's just basically you saying, I'm not going to be an asshole and surprise them. Although surprise can be a good thing if they're prepared for it, right? Well, surprise isn't prepared. If they are prepared for the game, I'm saying, then the surprise is a good tool if they understand that the game will have surprises. But don't do it as an asshole maneuver. Now, when creatures sometimes create their own environments, this could foreshadow something bigger, meaning like a massive flying creature starts to establish a nest. Well, if it's trying to create a nest, maybe the idea is that it might give birth to eggs, which, that it's that kind of thing, right? Is it trying to mate? Is it trying to gather food? Spiders are a perfect example of this. Spiders create a web. The web captures prey. The spider wraps the prey around and dangles it from its web. And so now you have this layered environmental encounter. It's not just a giant spider, it's a giant spider in its web. It's not just a giant spider in its web, it's a giant spider in its web with captured prey. Maybe some of the people captured are still alive and the player characters are trying to save them. Maybe there's a big MacGuffin in a dead body and the player characters are trying to get the MacGuffin off the dead body that happens to be up in the sticky web with the spider, blah, so on and so forth. Spiders make a good example. An excellent example of that. Some creatures dig holes, or again, make a nest at the highest reaches somewhere. There are NPCs, third parties involved in and around these animals. And of course, if you're going to incorporate the, an exotic Joe and the whole entourage thereof of himself and and the wider family of exotic animal keepers, they themselves might be a danger to themselves and others. The PCs try to surround a dangerous animal, and here comes the shaman on his giant elephant. I'll help you guys, and the PCs are like face palming, like, "Oh my God, get out the way!" you know, move, get out the way, get out the way, get out the way. Maybe there, maybe these people are more problems than are needed, and so the issue could be not only trying to attack, disable, capture, put down a dangerous predator. It could be stopping the people from being in the way of the PCs doing the thing in the first place. I'm going to drive the truck and try to trap it down the alleyway, and everyone's like, "Don't do it," Yeah, Dead Man says, yeah, see the above video of the owl intimidating the woodpecker. yeah, yeah, exactly, right? It's this idea that you never know what you might get into, and you may have the additional issues of, like, maybe the animal has given birth and is trying to protect its offspring. Maybe the animal is injured and like the thorn in the paw of the lion, or what's the other thing? The Yeti with the toothache, and the elf that didn't want to make toys ends up pulling the tooth out of the abominable snowman, right? Maybe there's more to a situation motivating what's going on instead of just anger, and it attacks you and you attack it. Maybe it just wants to be safe, or wants to hear a certain kind of music, or a certain type of food that is not considered flesh from a living person, right? Maybe the creature wants to wrap itself around something that's warm or cold, or what have you. The idea of a creature that's drawn to radiation or UV light, or something like that. Scott Poe says something that makes nests out of junk, like birds and squirrels. Yeah, could have any number of missing or stolen goods, magic items, peace treaties, etc. to recover. Exactly. I mean, okay. Let's go back to the Manticore. The Manticore has been attacking people on a road for months, and finally the Manticore has been captured. And then the PCs are like, "Well, why do you need us now?" And they're like, "Well, here's the problem. We need to let the Manticore go because something important was stolen. The Manticore made a nest, but we don't know where the nest is. So we need to let the Manticore go to go back to its nest. You need to follow it back to its nest and collect, the bag of missives that was stolen." Because now, of course, the animals probably don't know what the hell it is. But like you said, bits and pieces of, like, debris making a nest or something, it might be trapped in there. So maybe, like you said, important papers, like you said, peace treaties. Let's go to Game of Thrones, right? The very first beginning Game of Thrones. Who's supposed to sit on the throne? Well, there's a document that proves who's technically the next heir to the throne, getting that piece of paper back. And imagine the PCs have to let the Manticore go, make a run for it to find the nest. There are other agents that want to destroy the piece of paper. Maybe there's a other faction that wants to get the document that proves who's supposed to sit on the throne, but they want to keep it as, like, blackmail, and they want to sell it. Maybe somebody else wants to burn it. Maybe there's even another faction that wants to the PCs are having too much influence, and they want to see the demise of the PCs, and maybe they just happen to die accidentally out in the wild going after the Manticore that they let loose, and maybe they should have never done a thing because I need to be in charge, because that's a dumb idea, right? I think that just these are some awesome story elements, and then you wrap that around, the environment. You know, yeah. Androcles was the Greek character who took the thorn out of the lion's paw. Yeah, the main character of a common folk tale about a man befriending a lion. The tale is included in the RNA Thompson classification system as Type 156. Okay, the story reappeared in the Middle Ages, and that story has been again reflavored, retold, reused. The abominable snowman with the toothache and the elf one who wanted to be a dentist takes the toothache out. Same concept, right? The manticore that's pissed off. Maybe there's something wrong. Maybe the manticore that's been attacking people all this time is because somebody like an exotic Joe stole its little cub babies, right? And the PCs end up finding this out, and they're like, "Oh, you mean we could have solved this by releasing the cub babies? Well, damn it, you should have let me know that, right?" And so, of course, punching the rich noble in the face and getting the little cub babies that have been trapped down into the dungeon might be the way to solve the situation. And this is a great way to role play out the behaviors of normally considered animalistic monsters. Okay, animals do have instincts and they do have motivations, and yes, they can be role played. The shepherd and the lion was then ascribed to Aesop's fables. I remember Aesop's fables. There's a ton of them, and much like people say, there is no original story. You Just because it's been done before does not mean you cannot do it yourself. And so, pulling from these tropes, like I brought up the Tiger King. That's what we've been talking about this week. Aesop's fables are stories to pull from. Jurassic Park is something to pull from. All these things, you can pull all these little bits and pieces of elements. The X1, the Isle of Dread, you can pull from that. And just because it's been done before, who cares? When it's done in your voice, your images, your setting, your world, your theme, it should just feel new. And even if it's not new, common tropes are not bad things because they are shorthand. Tropes are shorthand to get across a ton of information in a very short amount of time. That's why dwarves are known to be heavy drinkers with, thick beards and to be kind of gruff, right? The reason for that is a common trope. And despite the fact that it is a common trope and some people roll their eyes, it is also very easy to get across thousands of words and lots of meaning and nuance in a very short amount of time. So, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Not sure tomorrow if there will be Future Friday or there will be an interview show. So I can't promise. I will promise there will be a show. I can't promise which one of those shows it will be. But there will be one. And thank you so much there, Dead Man, who posts in the Twitch feed that, yes, there are lots of ways to interact on this show. Unfortunately, I was unable to go live on Facebook. There is another way for me to do it, and I may even try to stream directly to SoundCloud. And lastly, I apologize for the bad sound. I am going to try to fix it. I'm thinking I need a new cable or a new microphone or something of that nature. But anyway, guys, I want to thank you guys for joining me and just supporting like long form content. I am a mail carrier, so a letter carrier here in the States. So I got to head off to work and, deliver supplies and baby food and diapers and medication and all kinds of doodads and goodies that people are expecting for their day. So thank you very much for joining me. Please check out the information below in the video if you want to see more things that I'm involved in or what I'm doing. Along with doing this show, I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing, so you can check that out. And of course, I read any and all comments, so for those who are unable to take part in the live show, feel free to comment. and yourself may find yourself and your comments on this show. So thank you very much. Anyway, have a great day. I'll see you later. Bye. Thanks for watching.